Anti-Greta. Well, we're joined live by Naomi Seibt herself, the self-styled climate realist. Naomi, thanks for coming on. Good to have you on the programme today. We've all heard about...
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank you for giving me a platform to speak about climate realism. Many people don't want to listen to us anymore.
Yeah, well, happy to have all points of view here. And we've had climate activists on the programme many times on here as well. It's the first time, though, we've had a climate realist, which you obviously describe yourself as. What does that mean, being a climate realist? What does that involve?
Well, most people on the side of climate alarmism, if you will, label us the climate deniers. And that is a term that I really dislike because it sounds like we don't really look into the science, we don't do our research, and we just hate the planet, we just want to destroy this earth, and we're just selfish and ignorant. And that's not what we're about. We're about being scientific skeptics and looking into more sensible ways to improve the environment, to be more in line with our values when it comes to interacting with nature. And so, that's what climate realism is about. It's about scientific skepticism and having more discussions in the scientific sphere again.
And just before you came on, we presented that report about a survey in the UK which says children are having nightmares. 1 in 5 are having nightmares, having trouble sleeping because they're so worried about climate change. Does that surprise you that kids are so worried about what's happening to the planet?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all, unfortunately, and that's what we call climate alarmism, because people like Greta Thunberg, and I'm sure she's a very nice girl and I don't want to shame her in any way, and she's innocent in all of this herself, I believe. They are spreading panic amongst so many young people. They are tearing apart relationships because people are fighting about who is right in all of this, who is wrong in all of this, and we're not allowed to speak anymore. So people are genuinely worried about the planet, and they think that their grandparents and parents are destroying this planet. And that is so horrible to see because it takes away their hope for the future. And so many young people have their own passions and would like to pursue their passions in the future and work a great job, and now all they're concerned about is climate change. That is really sad to me, to be honest.
There's clearly an element of panic about climate change, not only among young people, among many adults as well, I know, are worried about what's happening. Do you think that's unnecessary? Do you think that's unjustified?
Yes, I do think so, because I looked into these topics myself, and once I peeled back each layer of propaganda, if you will, about climate change, I came to the conclusion that really nobody seems to be talking about the core science anymore. Everybody seems to believe that just because there's this fake consensus out there, allegedly 99% of scientists agree that climate change is real and climate change is man-made. This study is absolutely way too vague, because of course climate change is real. Climate change has always been real. The climate has been changing for millions of years, but we need to be more precise in our questions and ask things like, are CO2 emissions actually that destructive to the planet? Are they really the cause of global warming, or are there other factors playing into this, like, for example, the impact that the sun has on the climate and water evaporations? There are so many other factors that are way stronger than just CO2 emissions. So it is ridiculous to believe that humans could have such a big impact on the climate. We cannot mess with nature in that way. At least that's the conclusion that I've come to from doing my own research. And the claims that the IPCC puts out there are mostly just based on climate models. So really just computer models, computer games that they came up with themselves.
I'm happy you mentioned science, because there is a lot of evidence, a lot of consensus among many scientists around the world that, you know, man-made activity is contributing to climate change. Obviously, as you said, nobody's arguing that climate change does happen, but these scientists are saying that what we're doing is damaging the environment. Is there a lot of evidence that supports your position that, you know, humans aren't actually doing that much damaging things to the planet?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I would say that actually most scientists who belong to this alleged consensus, they don't really know about the CO2 emission science themselves. But those are just scientists who work in different fields, like, for example, looking into what are the best alternative energy sources. So most people don't really concern themselves with the core science anymore. What can CO2 emissions actually do? So what the IPCC says is that CO2 emissions in a lab experiment, they do cause some amount of warming. That is true, and I agree with that, absolutely. But as it is a greenhouse gas. But first of all, it is just a very minor greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Most people don't even know that the main greenhouse gas in the atmosphere is actually water vapor. And then the man-made emissions, CO2 emissions, are making up just a tiny fraction of CO2 emissions in general. And what the IPCC claims now is that this warming effect in the lab experiment that you get from emitting CO2 into the air is 4 times as strong in the atmosphere as it would be in the lab experiment. And this number, this 4 times, this factor, is merely based on those climate models. And the problem with those models is they're basically just computer games, and that's not based on real-world data. And it is basically just they chose their own amplification factors to justify this number. It's 4 times as strong in the atmosphere as it would be in a lab experiment, and it's just based on really just they are blowing up this effect that is so insignificant in a lab experiment, and without really justifying it scientifically.
Sure. I want to talk a bit about Greta Thunberg. I think you knew that was going to come up. You say you're not anti-Greta, right? But that's what some media have called you, the anti-Greta. At the same time, some people are saying you're just rephrasing some of her slogans. You've often been critical of her movement, at least. Aren't you making this a sort of personal battle here between yourself and Greta Thunberg?
Well, kind of, because I do, of course, understand the comparison. And it was a German media outlet that started this anti-Greta thing in the first place. And it was to portray me as kind of this evil antichrist on the left, on the right. And I really disliked that. But then I thought, let's just have fun with it, and let's just claim this label. And well, if the media wants to portray as anti-Greta, then go ahead. But you don't stay for the anti-Greta, you stay for the Naomi Seibt. You come for the anti-Greta, you can stay for the Naomi Seibt, because I am not against Greta. I think she is probably a super nice individual, innocent in all of this, and I don't have anything against her. It's just that she is not about the science. She's basically just about spewing panic and telling people to change their lives entirely, demanding that governments control the lives of the people on this earth everywhere. And that, I believe, has nothing to do with science and skepticism anymore. And that's really what's so awful about all of this.
And just how some people have said that, Greta Thunberg is just being used. She's a project of environmental activists, or, as you said, left-wingers. Some people have said you yourself are a project of the opposite, of anti-environmental conservatives. How does that make you feel?
I really hate that this notion is out there, because I know for myself that I do everything on my own. I write my own speeches whenever I give an interview. Most people don't even know this. The people that I work with from a Heartland Institute, for example, they don't know when I write my speeches. They don't read it beforehand. So it's all just based on my own mind. And I'm having fun with all of this. I started my YouTube channel on my own. This is basically all just what I'm really passionate about, and I don't get tons of money for what I'm doing. I live at home with my family, and I get a lot of support from my mother and my grandmother, and that is just fantastic. And I wish that people would just listen to my main message instead of reading what the media has to say about me, my funding, and what goes on behind the scenes. I'm happy to debate anyone all the time.
So you said, it's interesting, you said you write your own speeches, which is, very interesting, somebody so young. Who's helping you spread your message then? I mean, you've achieved quite a lot of popularity or of media attention. Are you saying that's all done on your own with a bit of help, from and support from your family?
I started my YouTube channel completely on my own. I had nobody who could help me with editing or anything like that. I do everything myself. And then I started working with the Heartland Institute beginning of this year. And but all they do is just they help me organize something so the media can reach out to them, and then they send it over to me. And yeah, basically I schedule everything else myself, and I just get support. Like I get the opportunity to speak. I got the opportunity to speak at CPAC, and I get some other speaking opportunities. But yeah, the rest, all the brain stuff is basically myself.
Going back to the big question, to climate change. We all agree climate change is real, it's happening, it's having an effect on the planet, a negative effect. Greta and her camp, they certainly have their ideas, their plans about what needs to be done. What is your plan to tackle climate change?
Well, I don't actually agree that it's having a negative effect on the planet. It's just a natural phenomenon. So the climate has always been changing, and of course we will always experience natural catastrophes. And what can we do about them? Certainly not reducing CO2 emissions. That's the wrong way to deal with natural catastrophes. Of course, those are horrible, but we will never be able to fully prevent them. We can protect ourselves from nature by using energy efficiently. And for example, we live in houses because we want to protect us from cold or too hot weather outside. So we do actually need energy, ironically, and fossil fuel energy as well, because and we could also look into alternatives like nuclear energy. That would be a great idea. But we just need to make sure that we don't rely on energy sources that are not reliable or cheap in the long run, because we also need to concern ourselves with energy poverty. There are so many countries that are really poor, third world countries, and those people, they really need access to cheap and reliable energy sources, and that will help them get out of poverty. And the same goes for our own countries. If we enslave people with huge amounts of taxes, that will just destroy society entirely. And what about the dangers of a complete blackout? If we lose access to energy all of the sudden, then we're screwed. So I think those are topics that we should concern ourselves with, rather than climate alarmism.
OK, that's all we've got time for. Naomi Seibt, self-styled climate realist. Thanks for coming on. It's been a certainly interesting interview. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.